Hello, my name is Paul Gilbert, and I'm the CEO of Quanser. And we're back at Quanser Café, where we're talking about AI and complex modern engineering. I've been inviting a number of global leaders in education to help me unpack some of the issues surrounding how we can modify engineering programs and engineering education to try and get ready to support more complicated systems that exist in the world. You can find out more about the guests in each episode, as well as some of the projects highlighted in our conversations by visiting the links in the podcast description. If you're listening or want to watch the full podcast with subtitles, visit the Quanser Café on quanser.com. Today, we're exploring the transformation of engineering education to address rapid technology changes. With AI, data analytics, and cybersecurity evolving at lightning speed, universities and educators are rethinking how to prepare the next generation of engineers. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome 4 leaders in this field: Dr. Ken Ball, Dr. Gerhard Müller, Professor Paloma Díaz, and Dr. Yannis Yortsos. Let's hear first from Dr. Ken Ball, Dean of the College of Engineering and Computing at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. And Ken, I'm not sure how long you've been there. It's been quite a while, hasn't it?
Yes, I'm starting my 13th year.
Wow, congratulations. That's amazing. And obviously I've done a bit of stalking and found out some information about you. You've gone through some extensive growth. I know your enrollment and your research funding has increased significantly. And you've got vast improvements in the ranking and reputation of the university. I know it's regarded now as one of the top universities in the United States. But I think in terms of your personal kind of vision, in talking to you and many times, you're very interested in innovative programs. You're interested in low student to teacher ratios. You like mentoring. But I think for the most important thing really is this notion of innovation and keeping up with the change, because the world is not standing still, right? And I know that because every time we talk, there's something new happening at George Mason. So wonderful to have you. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, as I mentioned, we're talking about modern engineering, complex systems, modern engineering, and the introduction of AI into the world. And now it's on everybody's lips these days. So maybe we could start there a little bit. When you think about the world in which we live in today, Ken, how important is it to you, and what kinds of things have you done to kind of transform the university to address the digital needs of today? The digital transformation of George Mason, I think, has been quite profound.
So I did become dean at George Mason University in 2012. And shortly after I arrived at George Mason University, it was really cybersecurity at that time was just really burgeoning. And, as a dean and also part of the American Society for Engineering Education, every spring the deans get together at what's called an Engineering Deans Institute. And that year it happened to be in New York City in Manhattan. And all the New York area universities were hosting the event, and the theme was cybersecurity. And that's right about the time that Cornell and Technion had been chosen for Cornell Tech. They're that new university in Manhattan focused on cybersecurity. And as a new dean, I listened for several days while they were talking about their plans. And 2 things struck me. They were really focused on cybersecurity. They had massive investments that they were able to make, but they were really coming at it from a computer science, networks and software kind of a perspective, and also very much focused on financial markets and healthcare, which makes a lot of sense in Manhattan. So I came back to George Mason University and thinking 2 thoughts. One is we've got to figure out something to do in cybersecurity. But the second thought is I can't compete against all the resources they have in Manhattan and on Wall Street. And so what did I do? What I always do, I turned to my industry advisory board. And I'm very blessed here at George Mason University to have a wonderful industry advisory board, C-level folks from big companies and small, and also a good representation from federal government agencies as well. And so I went to the advisory board and said, I want to do something in cybersecurity, but we've got to figure out something that we can carve out, that we can be distinctive and play a leadership role. Well, what that ended up happening is we started we focused on cyber physical security, and we created the world's first cybersecurity engineering degree program. We started with a bachelor's degree, and then we added a master's degree. But our focus was on starting from the very ground level in the engineering design phase and building in cybersecurity, especially physical security, not just software, but also hardware as well, and really making sure that that's built in from the very beginning. At the time, Mike Pepe was the CISO for Northrop Grumman, and he was chairing the advisory committee. And I challenged Mike, let's develop a curriculum where all of you are going to fight over our graduates. And so we did that. And that really started us on this path of really, knowing what's going on and where the future is going, and then trying to stay ahead of that. And so the cybersecurity engineering program now has flourished. It's one of our biggest programs. A few years down the road, ABET decided that they wanted to have program criteria for cybersecurity engineering programs, and they adopted our curriculum as a model for the program criteria. And so now there are probably hundreds of cybersecurity engineering programs around the world and dozens in the US, and all influenced by what we were able to do here at George Mason University. So we are able to take a leadership role and working with our partners and working with industry and really figure out what is the future going to look like and how do we do that now. The next thing we did was we then went to data analytics. Everyone's talking about big data and data science and data analytics, and we wanted to be sure that we're also prepared for what the future brings in data. So again, I went to the advisory board, industry advisory board with our government partners, and we created a data analytics engineering master's degree program.
Oh.
We created that in a way that it was very easy to get into that from a variety of different disciplines, and not just engineering, but to have a true engineering degree where at the master's degree level, our students learn different techniques for mining data, analyzing data, different techniques to extract patterns from data, and to use data as a real tool, and to use all the data, not just little bits and pieces that you might grab, but to take the full advantage of the full wealth of data that's available. That program has really thrived. And today at George Mason University, in a typical year, we'll have 700 or 800 students taking the master's degree in data analytics engineering. About half of them are full-time, and the other half are full-time working professionals in the greater capital region here in Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia suburbs. And it's really adding value for them. So obviously, if we go into artificial intelligence, and when ChatGPT came out, then all of a sudden, that's really on everyone's mind, and that was able to bring it to something that anybody can put on their phone and start to use. Well, we are also looking at how do we then start creating programs and enhancing what we do in the areas of artificial intelligence. Fortunately for us, you can't do artificial intelligence without data, and we've already taken that step through data. And everything you do is digital, right? And you can't do anything unless you're doing it in a secure way. And so the cybersecurity laid a good foundation for data going into AI, that we can cover all aspects of working in the digital world. We also have very strong systems engineering approaches to our educational programs, including systems engineering, of course, but that helps us to really bring that kind of systems integration and even systems of systems, because when you're dealing with the engineering computing systems, that's exactly what you're dealing with. So we've also had enormous enrollment growth at George Mason University. When I became dean in 2012, we had about 4,300 students total, and now we're pushing 12,000 students.
Wow.
And a lot of that growth has been in computer science, cybersecurity, but also we've added more traditional programs. As a younger university, we didn't have, such as mechanical engineering. But everything we've added, we're making sure that our students, whether they're mechanical engineer, civil engineer, computer science, whatever their major is, that they have the opportunity to strengthen their skills and take coursework and do research and work with faculty in areas of digital engineering.
We'll be hearing more from Ken in our next episodes. Now on to my next guest, Dr. Gerhard Müller, Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at the Technical University of Munich in Germany. Welcome, Dr. Müller. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I always like to make a comment on why I invite certain people to be involved. And in my experience, Dr. Müller, you are an all-around very nice guy. I've met you in multiple locations, Germany, Beijing, London, and a few others, I'm sure. And I know you have a great deal to offer, and you've been all over the world, I think, as well as you're working in Munich to discuss and learn about how other people work on their issues surrounding engineering education. And I believe you're very insightful, you're thoughtful with a wealth of experience. In addition, and I actually didn't realize this, you spent some time before TUM as a consultant, I think, in industry. So you actually have a really great way to offer some real world perspective to the conversation. So again, I'll try another little bit of German. Guten Tag und willkommen im Quanser Café. Und ich freue mich auf ein tolles Gespräch, which means I'm looking forward to a good conversation, I think.
Thank you so much for the kind words, and congratulations to your excellent German.
So when we talk about AI and complex modern engineering, we're trying to break it down into different areas. And so the first area that I really want to touch base with you is the notion of transforming the engineering education to try and address the rapid changes that we're seeing in technology. And so from your perspective, let's start the conversation by asking, why do you think that topic is so relevant to complex modern engineering from your perspective?
Well, actually, as a matter of fact, the current setup of engineering professions is a traditional one dating back to, well, I would say even to the 19th century, when one decided to sort the engineering content according to kind of the artifacts: civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, etc. And I think we really have to put into question whether this traditional sorting has to be extended somehow with cross-cutting, competencies, disciplines, in order to cope with the changing world. Why do I say it has to be adapted? Because actually there is a strong inertia also in industry and in the stakeholder associations of engineering, which also are kind of sorted in the traditional way. So in order to cope with the new technologies, we really have to find a way in order to be quick enough to be able to change the value creation processes in our engineering disciplines adequately. And if we do not bring into the additional competencies to our students, they will not have the awareness how those value creation processes have to be adapted. And therefore, it's really a challenge on the one hand side, sticking kind of to well-established, traditional, and also in the past very successful structures, which have a certain curriculum where every stakeholder representing the curriculum will immediately defend his part in the curriculum as a very important one. And on the other hand side, to extend it with the new technologies. And I wouldn't limit it to AI. I would, build even a broader picture, think about additive manufacturing, think about the general issues of data analytics, data collections, etc. And this is really a challenge. This is really a challenge, how to cope with that.
So, I mean, if I take it in a nutshell, and my background's in mechanical engineering, and I believe your background's in civil engineering.
Exactly.
And so I remember growing up, we were very much in the mechanical engineering world, where if I had to define a part or a mechanism, I didn't really have to go outside of the mechanical engineering domain. I could do that and meet the specifications and pass it on. Whereas now, I think everything that's designed has to have some sense of communication and some sense of data I/O, some form of sensing, some sort of intelligence and communication and so on. So how do you then, I mean, are there examples in your institution where you're trying to bring the two together? Because if you have those traditional kind of areas, which I agree with you, they're really valuable, you have to have experts in those areas, but they have to communicate to others in order to make the systems work these days. What kind of things are you doing at TUM?
I think there is one approach which really, to my opinion, is very promising and is also successful and can be well integrated into the study programs. And this is, well, these are additional elements of challenge-based learning where you can actually incorporate the classical, let's say, the classical competencies, but together with other competencies coming from an interdisciplinary or even transdisciplinary approach together with other students. I think what you described is exactly brings it to the point that actually we have to abandon kind of the notion that you can solve the problems in a closed domain, which is of course actually, has been the secret of the great success of engineering for a long time. It's much, well, you have a much smaller parameter space in engineering, let's say, for example, than in economics, where a statement of some politician can change the development of the stock market for 2 or 3 days. So there you have a very broad parameter space, and we have the big advantage to be able to solve in closed parameter spaces. But this must not be a temptation to just stay in there. And I think if you well establish problems with open solution spaces requiring the interaction of different disciplines, I think you can bring the attitude which is necessary to solve current problems to our students. And what we do is actually to establish more and more project weeks or challenge-based learning. There are different brands. We have also in our European University initiative a format which is called the Eurotech Collider, where at the different locations in Europe, the students solve problems in an open solution space. They even have some fun there. They have a competition of who performed best. There is also very nice, a nice insight into the attitudes of the different countries, of the different local ecosystems. And this brings discussion to the young people.
Yeah, I mean, I love those experiences, and those experiences that we've witnessed. In fact, we've had competitions that you see. One of the conversations that comes up is, no matter how hard you try, at some point, then you have to assess the students. What kind of things are you able to put in place at TUM in order to make the kind of assessment process manageable and effective?
Well, I think first of all, you shouldn't paint it black or white.
Okay.
Of course, we still do a lot of classical teaching, classical assessment. Well, if you count we have the currency. These are the credits, the kind of proportional to the workload of the students. If you implement in the 30 credits of each semester, at least 5 credits in terms of challenge-based learning, where you bring the additional notion into the system, that doesn't mean at all that you abandon the classical competencies, which you of course also have to prove in order to shape the world. But you add to that, much more than previously, it was done previously, additional elements which require this transdisciplinary collaboration. And there, of course, the assessment type is quite different. Yeah, you will not have a benchmark solution anymore, which is it's much easier if you just have one solution and you just check whether the students comply with one solution. It's like if you say 1 + 1 is 2, there is no discussion and it's either hit or not. There, of course, you have different options. And I think then in the scope of the assessment, you will not just incorporate the problem solving, but you also will incorporate the problem solving attitude, and you will also incorporate the communication pattern and the question whether the student really were holistic, were on a holistic track in a sufficient manner. That means whether they incorporated the necessary stakeholders for their problem, because if one looks at things that didn't work well in engineering, it's often that important stakeholders had not been involved and create reactions. So I think, of course, we have to have new types of assessment, but this is feasible, and there are good examples, and we train it in extracurricular formats since a longer time already. And now the question is how those elements can become more and more parts of the core curricula of our study programs.
Dr. Gerhard Müller there. I'll be speaking again with Gerhard in our next episode on stakeholder engagement and influence for responsible engineering education. Moving on to my next guest now, Professor Paloma Díaz, Dean of the School of Engineering at Universidad Carlos III de Madrid in Spain. So welcome, Paloma. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Paul.
So I really wanted to first touch on why did I think it was a good idea to ask you to join me, and I think obviously with over 30 years of education leadership as an educator, it's very special because you know so much about the engineering education community. But in addition, as a computer science expert, that's your background. More than ever, AI and the use of AI in engineering is something which is really important. So I thought that was really valuable. Then if you look at your other hats that you've worn as a leader, running departments, running programs, running schools, in addition to that, you've spent some time, I think, in the US and in Canada, and have traveled the world. We've met in multiple locations, so that's a testament. So you've got a very global perspective as well, and of course, you're an all-around wonderful person. So I'm really happy to have you participate in this conversation. So one of the things that I've always thought is kind of interesting is, from your perspective, coming from a computer science or computer engineering background, you're very familiar with all the tools that exist. But you have students from, mechanical, electronic, and civil engineering, chemical engineering. How do you think that you'll be able to use the AI concepts in those departments?
Well, I think there are different kinds of AI. We are all used to the large language models, which are the most popular now. I'm not going to say names because I don't want to advertise any private company. I belong to the public sector. Sure. But there are many ways in which you can improve the way you learn about things. One of the things that could be very good for artificial intelligence could be trying to democratize things. These kind of tools is very useful because you can use different kinds of artificial intelligence tools to translate the concepts so you can understand them, but also to write your own content. It's not that you expect the artificial intelligence to do the things for you, but you have to look at these tools as an aid, something that will help you probably to communicate better or to understand better. And this is very powerful, especially I come from a university where we have a lot of international students. They come from all around the globe. So sometimes this could be very useful because I have had the students who didn't speak Spanish, but they didn't speak English either.
Okay.
So you need to find another way to communicate. And I always remember this character from Modern Family, who was Gloria, that in one of the chapters, she said, "You can't imagine how intelligent I am in Spanish." And this happens with everyone. I mean, if you're not using your mother tongue, you have limitations because you want to say things and you don't have the same fluency that you have in your own language. And for some students, this is at least could be a very good help.
Well, that's really interesting.
There are many other examples.
So you're talking about in this case, you're talking about the use of language models to help you actually communicate the nuances of different languages that people can communicate. Another area that I think is interesting is and I talk about this a lot with people, is about the vocabulary of engineering. If you come from a mechanical engineering discipline or a chemical engineering or electronic, your vocabulary is kind of different. And in the world we live in today, you need to have people that are able to talk across disciplines or interdisciplinary kind of conversations. Yeah. Do you see that as being a part of what's useful in terms of transforming the educational program where you are?
I think it can be definitely useful because I've seen that when when students, foreign students join the course, the most difficult thing, if you don't speak their language, is to grasp the technical jargon. And in each discipline, we have our own jargon. And in today's life, I think the most relevant problems need different disciplines to work together. And the problem, for instance, with computer science, when they are working with doctors for a health project, they start to say a lot of things that no one can understand. This can be a way to find a common ground, a level where everyone can at least try to communicate what is important to the other people. But this is just one example. There are many other things that can be done. The important thing, yeah.
Right. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No. I was going to say that what is important is to understand which are the possibilities of the tool you are using, but also which are the limitations. And this is where we have to work more.
And in your institution, are there programs or approaches, or are you reviewing those kind of things to try and transform the program that you have in Madrid?
Yeah. We are in a public university, so all our programs have to be accredited at a national level. But 2 years ago, the legislation changed, and now we have to review all the programs. And since we have to go through this very bureaucratic process that is pretty boring, we are taking the chance to introduce a new course in all the university degrees, not only for engineering, but also for laws, business, humanities. And the new course is about artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow.
Because, we realize that, as I said at the beginning, artificial intelligence is now pervasive. It is important for engineers, but also for journalists. They have to know the tools they have, whether the contents they are created are original or not, are true or not. And there are many tools they can use, but they have to be able to really master the use of the tools, not just as users, but as doers or creators. So we are including this course that will be mandatory for every degree in the university. And of course, the course is tailored according to the degree where you teach the course, because it's not the same teaching mechanical engineers the teaching lawyers. It's completely different. They will use different tools.
But I think that's really fascinating, because one of the things that we've talked about at conferences, and that's come up as the theme in many conferences, is, well, there's the good side of AI and there's the challenging dark side of the use of AI, and also the unintended consequences of developing technologies or approaches or applications. And from an engineering lens, you might not fully appreciate what the impact is on society. But if you're looking at it from a policy-making lens or a business lens, you might not understand the challenges that exist on the engineering side. So this is really interesting. So when we talk about transformation of the engineering program, it's not just the transformation of the engineering discipline itself, it's transforming it so that they are now somehow able to communicate with other people from different disciplines.
I also think that to better understand the impact, it's very good to have this kind of generic course where you just analyze which are the types of artificial intelligence you can use. But there is something that we also have to do, and I think this is especially for engineers, because engineers do things, and things impact behavior or society or the environment. So something I'm also trying to push, and I'm doing just right now as an experiment in my courses, is to include some modules which are called microethics. And the idea is that if you are going to design a database or if you are going to program, we will have some activities that you perform in a daily basis, and you will have to analyze which is the impact of that activities. If you are programming, your program could be better or worse in terms of the carbon footprint. So we make you reflect upon what you are doing, because just as a piece in the system, you also have an impact. It's not a generic discussion of whether artificial intelligence is good or bad, but also in the small things I do as an engineer, which is the real impact I'm having using artificial intelligence.
A pleasure talking with you, Paloma, and I look forward to catching up with you again in one of our next episodes. My final guest today is Dr. Yannis Yortsos, who is currently the Dean of the University of Southern California Viterbi School of Engineering, which is where he's been since 2005, so almost 20 years now. Thank you very much for joining us, Yannis.
My pleasure to be here, Paul. I appreciate being invited to have this conversation, and I look forward to it. I think it's very timely and very important for where we are today in the world.
Well, I want to introduce you a little bit. I know I can't do justice to your resume. It's incredible, but I mean, Yannis has been at I think USC since 1978. You've had leadership positions for 30 years now, so there is a wealth of experience behind you. You have multiple leadership roles, actually, originally in the chemical and petroleum engineering department, and then you've been associate dean and now dean, obviously, for a long period of time. But should be recognized as someone who is forward-thinking. I didn't realize this, that you were one of the people that was pioneering this position to change the conversation, to enable us to talk about engineering being kind of the discipline that's going to affect our lives more than ever, and changing that perspective. The enabling discipline of our times, I think, is the way you describe it. So with that kind of the notion that things are changing really fast, and again, this is a conversation which we hear everywhere, that the notion of transforming the engineering educational experience to meet today's needs, the rapid pace of technology change and the introduction of AI now in a broader kind of approach. That's something which is really easy to comment on, but so difficult to do. So maybe you could share some of your thoughts as to how you've been doing it at USC and how things you think could evolve and the challenges associated with that.
I think all of this is related to this change of the conversation, and I will give you a different example a little bit later about what engineers do and what is expected of engineers. And I think that in many ways in the past, engineers were considered kind of like these geeky people that, they were attracted to the profession because they're very good in math and everything. And I can say that maybe that's how I was attracted at some point in time.
Guilty, yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
But the impact that technology has today is much, much bigger than ever before. So students have to also understand the purpose. There's a purpose associated with, studying, let's say, engineering and the impact they can have to the world. So it is something that I call, I'm coining a phrase of trustworthiness or trustworthy engineers. Now, doesn't mean that engineers are not trustworthy, but I think that we, in addition to developing people with outstanding technical talent and competence, I think we want to also look at the character part. So they have outstanding character as well. I think this trustworthiness will be a big, important part of the world of engineers and technology today and in the future. We see this every day around us, and how technology is used. Now, let's talk about AI, which are obviously, and machine learning and all this advanced computing. At USC, we started an effort at least, or maybe 5 years ago, to install some AI content in pretty much every major in our curriculum, whether it's chemical engineering or because we challenge our faculty to do that for a number of reasons, including the tremendous impact that these technologies will have in shaping up the professions of the future. And this is something that we have implemented. And right now, all our entering students know that they will graduate in engineering with a significant exposure and content and skills in AI and machine learning and understanding all these technologies that are associated with that. Neural networks.
Can I just ask a question? Because you touched on, and I wanted you to continue, but you just touched on a point which I find really interesting. So I was asked to be on a panel about a month or 6 weeks ago in the UK, and the question that they posed was, do we know how to teach AI? And I asked my engineering team, because I'm not an expert, and they just rolled their eyes. And I went, of course we do. We've been doing it for 20 years. Like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah. And I challenged that. And I said, well, some people have been. Some people in computer science and some people in other areas have been taught. But nowadays, people are coming into the university, especially today in the last couple of years, thinking Chat GPT is AI. And it's not. It's
not,
an application
one part of it,
AI,
yeah.
right? So I could go back to your introducing AI to all of the engineering programs. I think is fascinating, especially since you did it 5 years ago.
We started doing this 5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So that which is amazing. And for me, I'm just want to know, how did you go about it? Did you try and teach them about the broad range of AI techniques and like what's the kind of approach that you're taking?
So the techniques, I'll give you a personal anecdote of that. So I'm a chemical engineer, right? So
Right.
I should know nothing about AI. Some time ago, early during the pandemic, I remember I talked to the computer science chair because he was telling me, well, we need some additional faculty to teach an AI. I said to him, let me take a look at it. Maybe I'll teach it. And so I bought a number of books on AI and, tried to learn obviously about that. Fundamentally, what you learn there is how it's essentially an optimization problem. And, these neural networks essentially do that, but in a complex way. But the fundamental underlines mathematical techniques that you use are not really that foreign to pretty much all of our students, particularly if you understand, you need to understand a bit of linear algebra. So pretty much all of our students get that. And so the difficulty comes from developing techniques, developing, a sort of a algorithmic way by which you can do this. And you have to obviously pay a lot of attention to it and also go through the intricacies of this. And obviously this can be quite sophisticated. And so to close my previous example, when I look at all that and I look at all these techniques, I said, maybe I'm not yet at this point where I can actually teach this class. But one can actually learn how to do this. And I can tell you, we have a number of very talented faculty, let's say in material science, that use AI to be able to solve problems that were unsolvable before. For instance, how do you use, let's say, quantum mechanics in order to be able to predict behavior of many, billions and trillions of molecules? Can you do this in atoms? Can you do this, using machine learning? And the answer is yes. You can use a significantly smaller subset of molecules and atoms and have to be able to train the particular AI to be able to then extrapolate for you. So in this way, people have been able to interpret things that were not interpretable until now. In, I think, chemical physics, there's some anomaly associated with the dielectric constant of water that until now has not been able to be proved. And this technique allow them to do that. So there is an explosion, as you can understand, of this field. But I think our undergraduate students have the ability, with the mathematical knowledge that they have, to be able to tackle this. So it is not anything much more sophisticated than doing, some advanced linear algebra of some sort.
But I would imagine, though, that if they're using that throughout their courses from first year, second year, third year, moving on, you must now have people doing postgraduate work and going into doing research who are really well versed in AI techniques.
Absolutely. And, this is obviously the more, so what I just want to make sure that I clarify that, folks that are doing electrical engineering, computer engineering, and computer science are obviously a lot more, they take a lot more of these courses than, let's say, people in civil or environmental or in chemical engineering. The point, however, is that people need to be exposed and understand the power of these techniques, because they are going to change the profession. Actually, the profession is being changed already. The professions are changed already through AI, and how it is practiced today and will be practiced in the future will be very much influenced by that. No, unquestionably. And so the
Right.
students have the ability to be able to be much more proficient and ready to be able to address that. And I'm expecting that this will become a significant part of engineering education across the board. I may even throw the word ABET in there, and maybe ABET will come in and say, what are you doing in AI?
Great to have you with us, Yannis. So that wraps up today's episode of Quanser Café. We've heard from a range of engineering education leaders as they tackle the challenge of adapting to rapid technology changes. From Ken's innovative programs at George Mason University to Gerhard's push for the interdisciplinary learning, Paloma's focus on AI and ethics, and Yannis's commitment to trustworthiness in engineering. It's clear that the future of engineering education is evolving in exciting ways. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll explore stakeholder engagement and influence for responsible engineering education. We're keen to hear your thoughts about the season or potential topics or guests to feature in future episodes. Please leave comments or connect with me on LinkedIn. And to learn more about Quanser, visit quanser.com. I'm Paul Gilbert, and this is the Quanser Café. Thank you so much for listening today. Goodbye.